Incredible job. I'm back. Worship, you guys did incredible, as always. Yes, I am back. I'm not just the fun guy. I also know some things. So yes, I'm giving the message today. And yes, thank you. I realized that before today, the last time I was on this stage with people looking at me and with the mic I was pretty young, like elementary school. And we'd just gotten back from a missions trip to Mexico. And the Sunday after, Gene or whoever was talking brought the families up to talk about what we did. And the adults were talking most of the time, but then they wanted to get the cute little kids involved. And so they went down the line asking us seemingly easy questions. And they were like, "Oh, did you have fun?" "Yes." And everyone claps, and, it's warm and fuzzy. And then, "Oh, does God love everyone?" They're like, "Yeah." And then the person before me got something like, "Does God want us to tell others about him?" And they're like, "Yes." And once again, claps and everything. Then it got to my turn, and they said, "Do you have to go to Mexico to tell people about Jesus?" And I had seen that everyone else said yes, and then they got cheers. And so I said yes. It turns out that's not the right answer, and I let down the whole church and my parents, and haven't been back up here since. So hopefully today goes a little bit better. But I get the last message in our famous Last Words series. I know it's been kind of hard to track what series we're in with all of the changes that have had to happen. But I get the very last one. So the very last words that Jesus said, which is great timing. Good planning, Tim. Because what did we celebrate last week? Why weren't we here? You would have probably answered the question right if you were on stage back in the day. What do we call the Friday before Easter? Friday. Yes. There's also an adjective in there. Opposite of bad. Good Friday. Good job. We got there. And Good Friday is actually when we celebrate, might not be the right word, but we remember that Jesus died. So it's kind of weird that we call it Good Friday, because to me that seems like a very bad thing, someone dying, and not even just dying, getting beaten, whipped, you name it. Jesus went through it and then died. And I'm thinking, if that was like a Disney movie and that's where it ended, that'd be the worst Disney movie of all time. That's not a very good story. But thankfully, we know that that's not where it ends. But we are going to focus on the actual death today, because there are some words that Jesus said right before he died that are pretty important. So we'll throw those up on the screen. They are in John. And I guess, Word of Triumph. That's the title. Get excited. So, when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished." And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. So the "it is finished" piece is what we're going to focus on. And you might be asking yourself, "Mitch, how are you going to talk for this whole time about 3 words when 2 of them are it and is?" And the answer to that is these 3 words quite possibly might be the 3 most important words in the Bible in order, because they kind of represent everything that it means to be a Christian and why we have hope. And so we could actually talk for hours and hours and hours on what this means, but I tried to kind of bring it down a little bit, and we're only going to talk about 2 main points. The first of those is that this had to happen. God knew that this had to happen. Jesus knew that this had to happen. And so when Jesus says it, the it of that is this plan that Jesus and God had from the beginning is finished. That's what the it is. And there's so many prophecies in the Old Testament that talked about this and that knew it had to happen. And it's really easy for us to be like, yeah, of course it happened when we're thousands of years down the road. But even before it happened, God knew it had to happen, and his followers also knew that it had to happen. And for me, I've never been a great planner in general. I've gotten a little bit better as I've gotten older, but I was the kid that if someone asked, "Oh, have you done the homework yet?" and it wasn't due tomorrow, I hadn't even looked at it yet or started studying for the test yet. Like, those were just, I didn't think about tomorrow, much less years and thousands of years and the salvation of everyone. I don't look that far ahead. A couple examples of that would be one time, my family and I were going to the mountains to go to the hot springs. Anyone been to the hot springs? They're incredible. I think we did the Sulphur Hot Springs, which I don't exactly remember where those are, but they're somewhere in the mountains. Now, what would be the one thing you might want to bring to Hot Springs? Myself, yes, and a swimsuit. I heard that from some people. Yes. Is there something else you'd want to bring? A Bible. Yes, you could. Hey, I didn't even think of that one. The story's worse than... I forgot two things. I forgot my swimsuit, and I forgot my Bible. So that adds to it. What's up, Josiah? See, I'm so old, I didn't get one of those for a while. I was like 16 before I got my first phone. So I'm there with you. So hang in there if you don't have a phone. But point being, I didn't plan very well for that one. The other thing my family reminds me of is the time that I brought like 6 pairs of pants for an overnight trip, and I didn't bring like a single piece of underwear, socks, a new shirt. Didn't bring any of those, but I had 6 pants. I was ready for anything that I needed pants for. And the worst one, which I even debated telling you all about because I know that I will hear about this from especially my small group. I forgot my shoes when I was going to school one day. And I would love to say that that was like, oh, cute little Mitch in kindergarten forgot his shoes. That was sophomore year of high school. So I was, that makes me like 15-ish, and I forgot my shoes. Now, in my defense, because I feel like I need to defend myself because I can already feel the judgment. I'm the youngest of 3. Some of you might know my older siblings, Megan and Philip. They're incredible. But that means I didn't have to drive myself anywhere ever until senior year. And so I got used to just putting on my shoes in the car. I'd like grab them on my way out, put them on. Once I saw the building, that meant I was close to school. That was like my trigger to start putting my shoes on. And so on this day, reached down for them, started to do the frantic, faster hand movement. And that moment of realizing I didn't have my shoes, I'm sure none of you have made a mistake that bad, obviously, but that moment of, oh no, I can't fix this. My shoes are at home and I'm at school. And I went to the school K-12, so all of my friends, I had to walk down the hallway, and I knew they were all looking at me, and it was rough. So moral of all those stories is I don't plan very well. So it was kind of, that's one of the things I realized is I'm like, wow, God had to have this plan in place from the beginning of time until Jesus' death, and it had to work out exactly how he needed it for our story to mean what it does today. And it did. It worked out just like that. And I think this year especially, there's been so many times where we're like, oh yeah, my plan to go do whatever next week, that'll work. And then COVID happened. And then, oh, it'll be 2 weeks. I remember when we got the email, grab your stuff from the office, we'll be back in 2 weeks. And we're here a year and a plus later. I moved to Denver in the middle of this, thinking, I'll move in July. By Christmas, things will be normal again. Obviously, for like a million this year. So that's kind of been a sense of that I've had this whole year is like, I'm so not in charge. Or I can't plan anything right now. I can't plan a trip because I don't know when things are going to be open. And so this verse and this whole story, or this is the end of the story, kind of put me in a different mindset of like, oh, yeah, my plans aren't going according to how I thought they were going to go at all. But God's plan, that's worked this entire time. So I hope you take a little bit of that from this as well, that it is finished means that God's plan for us, for our salvation, is finished. He did all that planning, and it got exactly where it needed to be when it needed to be. So that's point 1. It was supposed to happen. It was according to plan. Number 2 is that Jesus did all of the hard work for us. And I say that because this man lived a real life, felt real pain, and still chose to die for us. And one of my favorite kind of visuals in the whole Bible is the moment Jesus died, something really cool happened. So we'll throw that verse up there in Matthew. And it says, "And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split." So this is a different gospel, a different person telling the story, but at the same moment, that Jesus is saying, it is finished, and he gave up his spirit, this same thing happened. And this curtain, while it was a physical thing as well, kind of represented this spiritual boundary between us and God. This curtain was meant to keep out those who weren't holy enough from the Lord, from God. And only like priests and people like that could go behind the curtain. And even then, they would tie a rope to them so that if they died, they could get them back out quickly. So that was kind of the importance of this curtain, is it was a physical and a spiritual divide. So the moment Jesus died, though, this curtain was torn. And this, you might be thinking of like, I guess we don't have curtains in here. Maybe like those, like, oh, it's a little curtain. How hard could that be to tear? This curtain was gigantic. Like we could probably picture it being at the top of this ceiling. And the fact that it was torn from top to bottom means that obviously there are some pretty powerful things at work in that situation. So the first part of this plan of Jesus dying needed to happen so that this second part of this barrier being torn is opened up to us. So there's no longer this divide between us and God. And does anyone, like in the Old Testament, what are some things that people would do, like if they sinned, how would they make up for it? Does anyone know? I heard someone whisper sacrifice in a very scary tone of voice. But yes, you are correct in that one. Because that was just how it had to be done. And I don't know about you, but I would have lost a lot of pets or other animals to sacrifice if I had to do that every time that I sinned. Right? A terrible thought to think about. I'm sorry to even put that in your mind. But the good side of that is that isn't the case, that we don't have to do that. This fact that God is now in our heart just means that, or Jesus can live within us, we can say sorry in Christian terms. We can repent and apologize to the Lord and bring it up to him. He already knows what we did to begin with. But that's what it means to have Jesus in our heart. So that's really cool. That's one huge piece. Second piece, looking more long-term, is that we get to go to heaven, which actually was the last time I talked was about heaven, so I thought that was kind of cool. And that, for me, is such a helpful way to frame what we're going through now and why we're going through it. Because if someone just tells me to do something, I'm always going to be like, why? Or like, clean your room. Why? It's going to get dirty again tomorrow. And if I don't get a good answer for that, or making my bed, that's one of the worst ones. It still doesn't make sense to me. We're going to get in and out of it. Why do we just keep on making it in the middle? But that's very much aside from the points. But this gives us what our end goal is. It lets us know that we have this really cool place to end up where there's no pain and suffering. And so I think one of the best kind of things that you could probably relate to is school in that regard, right? You're like, why? I'm so happy for you. That, yeah, there's always a couple rough classes. Yeah, and I'd never had to do online, so I don't know what that's like, but I'm sure it's not incredible. But do we really feel that strongly about school? Did I choose a good example? Okay, good. See, that's how I felt. I don't even know what an atom is. But I kind of do. They make up things, and then other things happen, science. But I remember a switch happened around high school, so it took me till then. So if it takes you that long as well, I'm sorry, but you might have this realization as well, where I was like, oh, I went to elementary school, which gave me to middle school to high school, and for my case, I went to college to find a job that could support a life and, maybe a family down the road. Seventh graders, I know that I have to find a girlfriend for that to happen, so we'll get there. Had to jump out in front of that before you guys did. But I had that realization. I'm like, oh, everything I'm doing, it's going to get me somewhere I want to go. That's that. And then I was like, okay, maybe I should try a little bit harder in school. Maybe I should study a day and a half before the test or start my homework a little bit earlier. Any procrastinators there with me? Okay, that's comforting. I will tell you that I did graduate college, and my habits did not change too much from high school. So, Colorado Superior University. CSU, go Rams. Allie, I see you back there. I'm so glad you asked that. That made me happy. Yes, CSU, I graduated from there. So that's another helpful thing to frame our mindset is like, sometimes it's not super fun right now to be a Christian. I don't really know why I'm doing it. Is it worth it? I just get made fun of at school, or I just can't watch the fun movies, or, whatever it be, can't play the video game. Can guarantee you I went through all those thoughts that you're thinking, if you can relate to that. But once again, having the end in sight helps things feel more meaningful and know why we're doing it. And I can't help but think that that's also what Jesus was thinking too. No one would just want to get whipped and beaten and wear a crown of thorns and then die just because. But he knew that his part in this big story, his thing needed to happen so that all of us could live eternally with him, and with him in our hearts. So the risk-reward, the pros and cons, the pros were far, far greater for Jesus, and we're really thankful that he did it for us. Because I'm willing to bet none of us are going to go through anything quite as painful as what he did for us. So that's kind of what the title is Jesus did the hard part for us. He defeated the enemy. So now we just get to be on the winning team, free of charge, and we also get to be on the same winning team as everyone else who's chasing after Jesus. So that makes things a whole lot easier. And the last piece, it wouldn't really be a sermon or a talk if you didn't talk about the Greek words that originally the Bible was in and then translate them and do some digging in there. So I had to do that. This phrase, "it is finished," that's our English version of it. But the Greek version is tetelestai, or something along those lines. It's as close as I'm going to get. Means paid in full. And when I was doing some research on that, it's actually an accounting term from back in the day. So that made me happy. Everyone else doesn't care at all. But it was more used in like someone owed someone a debt. They repaid the debt. When they gave it back, tetelestai was the way to say, you're good, you paid it back, we're even, no more questions asked. And I think the weight of that is, at the time Jesus died, he died for all of the sins that had already happened up until that point, which is a lot. But he also died for all of the ones that we're going to keep doing because we're imperfect and we're human. So this whole paid in full concept, I just got a lot of comfort from all these things. And the comfort I got from this one was sometimes I feel like I only like my good sins, or like the easy ones to talk about, are the ones that I can tell people about and confess, and Jesus died for those ones. But the ones in the dark corner, it's like those ones, it feels so hard to let Jesus forgive those for you. You're like, I don't deserve his forgiveness on these ones. Those are bad. But when he was the ultimate sacrifice, unlike an animal or unlike anything else, he's the last sacrifice that ever needed to happen. And that means that I can know that, doesn't mean I should keep sinning intentionally, but everything that I do, God already atoned for it. So I took that as more like I'm free to live my life and make mistakes and just keep growing from them. And that part is super helpful. So let me scroll down on my notes here. So that's really it. So the two pieces are, one, this plan was the greatest plan of all time. So worship team, you guys can start making your way back up. And this plan, I just couldn't get over the fact that this plan started at the beginning of time, and it took so many pieces to get us to this point. But then it ended when Jesus says it is finished. That means the plan was fulfilled exactly how it needed to be. And then part two is all the hard stuff is done. Now we just get to have fun in life and take advantage of the hard work and the sacrifice that Jesus made to get us here. So we'll close in prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for just being here with everyone. We're so glad that in a year full of disappointment and change, that this has been one thing that stayed relatively consistent. It's been sometimes online, sometimes in here, but we know that you've been here with us through it all. I thank you that you had a son that was willing and able to do everything that it took to get to the cross, because the cross was the end of the story, but there's a lot that went into getting him there, and that he was willing to die for us, to be the ultimate sacrifice, and let us win. We've already won when we accept you into our heart. So I pray that for those of us who maybe have been questioning if it's worth it or if God is real, any of those things, that you can remind us that you've had a plan all along. You're going to keep executing that plan, even if we try to screw it up. It's going to keep working for your glory. So I pray all these things in your name. Amen.